Potential is invisible, but proofs make you stand out. And I've heard it often. Parents come and tell me that their kids have huge amount of potential. But when I start talking to them about proof, that's where they get stuck. In the future, you would not be hunkering after potential. It would not get you jobs. It would not get you into the university, nor would it allow you to stand out. What distinguishes them would be the proof points that they are going to put forward in their life. Do understand that marks are very important, and this is one of the key dimensions that you should focus upon, at least in the early stages of the education journey of your child. But if you start to go beyond marks, you would start to look at the body of work that your child would be able to produce. You would start to see whether they actually become adult and whether they are in a position to do complex problem solving. Because this complex problem solving is the key skill which defines adulthood. This is the key skill which allows them to stand apart from the other people and get ahead in their life. How is it that you would develop this complex problem solving? Well, the short answer is that you send your kids to school and expect some magic to happen in terms of they getting to these skills. But unfortunately, schools offer a one shoe fit all solution. They do provide opportunities for extracurriculars, projects, and prototype development. But because it's a broad based approach, the individual nuance gets left. Schools, teachers, parents, all of you become like policemen. They all become like reminders, they become micromanager of their children's time. This is not what you want. The best gift that you can give your child is the future job security. But think about it. In this world where AI is changing everything, you do not know what tomorrow looks like. How can you guarantee that? You can only guarantee it by looking at how the present has changed in reference to past in terms of jobs, and probably applying this learning into projecting what the future would look like, and then preparing your kids for that future. Let me explain that in detail. So, the jobs that you or I have done have been ensconced in the physical world. So, jobs like engineers, jobs like doctors and medicine professionals, even businessmen, these jobs were rooted in the physical world. But when I talk to kids of today, they talk about altogether very different jobs. They talk about becoming chefs, avatar managers, event orchestrator, whatever that means. They talk about becoming TikTokers or YouTube influencers. I don't think any one of us could have imagined these jobs to have existed, 15, 20 years back. Yet, our education continues in a same manner or largely similar manner as you and I have studied. We need to intervene in slightly different ways and make sure that these kids are ready for the jobs of the future. And the jobs which are probably much more automated and live in the world which is self driven and machine driven as compared to the world that we exist and live in today. So, similar to how digital changed from physical, I think this is going to get enhanced to an automated world. And in that case, a lot of routine and repetitive tasks would be outsourced to machines, whether they reside in a computer or sit in a humanoid robot. It is very, very important that at that juncture, your kids have skills which are integrative in nature. They're able to think through multiple disciplines and assimilate that into one whole thought process. They're able to mix and match multiple ideas that are coming from different streams, and that becomes their ability to distinguish themselves from others as well as the machines that they are going to be working with. And to that extent, it becomes very important that we focus on multidisciplinary education. To that extent, it becomes important that you focus on wild swathes of interest rather than a very narrow focus. And to that extent, it becomes very important that early specialization is avoided and your kids focus on what's called as a liberal art education, where you study sciences, humanities, and multiple other disciplines, not just building rigor and analytical capability, but also building contextual understanding. And when you're able to do all of this, that becomes your differentiator for your child. And this would probably be the biggest gift that you can give them. Let me explain this to you through another example. I think about 10, 12 years back, there was a huge focus on data science jobs. And a lot of kids that I would meet at that point in time were either studying data science, studying business analytics, and in about 4 to 5 years from that point, this interest vanished because many of these jobs became automated. Algorithms were written which took care of these jobs and no humans were needed. And the core of this thinking is actually multidisciplinary capability. And to build that capability, you have to focus on the most human of all the capabilities that you could help your child generate, which is the thinking capability. This year marks the year in which the first high school students would graduate who started using ChatGPT. It was introduced in the November of 2022, and these kids are going to graduate this year. And as I work with all of these kids, I've seen a very distinctive change in the way they approach problems. A lot of them have become extremely dependent on ChatGPT to create new ideas. They rely on it to generate their creative output. They rely on it to do the bulk of thinking. And while there's nothing wrong with the advent of technology, this incapacitates them in terms of their core thinking capability. Now, if you want to develop that, it is very important that these children are given a process of structured practice where they are given problems which are hard to solve and they are gently led onto this path by a human mentor in a one-on-one setup where they learn to think about difficult problems, formulate independent point of views, generate a plan, set goals which are achievable, revisit them if required, fine tune their process, set up pilot objectives, and then see whether they are achieving these goals or not. And when they do that, on one hand, they generate their thinking capability, which sets them apart from machines. But on the other hand, they generate proof points, which becomes a portfolio of support documents which help them find success in future. And therefore, to my mind, it is very important that a mentoring process, which is not a one shoe fit all process, is the solution. And that is going to help your child succeed. And this program, which we have designed, is specifically focused on helping you achieve that. It is a 1:1 mentoring program, which would mean that one child would be dedicatedly mentored by one mentor. And it is explicitly focused on generating proof points in his life, which would allow him to get ahead. This program is specifically designed to generate evidence for your children. Over the next 12 months, through one-on-one mentoring, your child would be able to develop 2 to 3 mini projects, which are demonstration of his interest in a particular area, and would be able to commit to a larger capstone, which will show depth and increased commitment in a particular idea. The broad notion is that we will hunker after demonstrated outcomes and success map. And this is what is going to get your child ahead. So if you want to give unfair advantage to your child, focus on this particular pathway, which will allow him to build proof over and above potential that he has exhibited across his primary school years. Your child does not need a career decision, at least not yet. At this point, what you do need to realize that while careers may come later, your child cannot afford to drift. And therefore, figuring out what the interest scape of your child is becomes absolutely critical. Let's dive in and understand what is it that we are trying to explain here. Each one of you would understand that very well, that your children would have specific interests. These interests have begun to develop because they've started to understand the baseline of almost all the subjects that they would study. And they have also interests outside school, including sports, music, and other extracurricular activities. At this point in time, rather than committing to a specific career path, it is very important that you start to understand what these interests are. How is it that these interests relate to the future persona of your child? And frankly, try to widen this interest scape. So if you bring in calibrated noise into this interest scape, your child begins to understand what his interests really are and eventually start widening them over a period of time through multiple such experiments. Thereby you would be able to zero into something which is far more valuable, which is clarity and depth, potentially into one or two areas that may start to make sense for your child. So this process of experiment is what I call as mini projects, where your child actually commits to one or two small projects which helps him to clarify whether the interest that he has in this particular area is real or not. These mini projects could take the form of blog posts, small projects such as a prototype building or a survey, and eventually allow your child to commit to a much broader, much deeper picture. This is actually a scientific process, but this takes a lot of effort, and this is highly customized to the needs of the child. Eventually, as the interest starts to widen, this starts to generate outcomes in terms of future career pathways, future interest areas which the child would focus upon through the choice of major in grade 11 or 12, and more specifically in the university level studies. If you're setting deadlines for your child, then he is probably not learning to solve problems. He is not learning to self-manage. He is being fed from a spoon, and this is the kind of learning that will not stand by him when he grows into an adult. What you actually want is a 1:1 mentoring program, a mentoring program which is designed to help a mentor take independent charge of your child's development. That adult supervision, that focused attention will allow the mentor to set goals which are customized to the needs of your child, and then monitor and track them in a manner which is conducive to your child's development. Eventually, such focused mentoring would lead to the development of executive function and would convert this child's potential into a manner which allows him to grow and realize the full extent of his capability. So if you want to make sure that your child commits to a credible path to adulthood and not really a prescriptive medicine, then probably this mentoring program would make sense for you. So it might be a good idea to commit to a program like this, which is a one-on-one program which gives guidance to your child through structured practice and builds a body of work that he could potentially showcase through his school progression. Think of it as akin to executive coaching process. Some of you parents might have experienced this in some form and shape. But when you apply this to a student who is probably 11 or 12 years old, a preteen if you may, then you have to tailor this particular process to the specific needs of that child. You cannot leave him open. You have to give him some structure. And that tightrope walk between structure and creativity is the heart and soul of this one-is-to-one mentoring process. That cadence is set by the mentor who focuses on the interest that the child has, expand those interests over a period of time through, of course, free-ranging exploration, but beyond that, actual demonstration of that interest through projects, through prototypes, through interest-based activities, and over a period of time, child starts to develop his executive function. He not only takes charge of his own learning, but he starts to plan, he starts to set objectives, and he starts to follow through in terms of what he needs to do. Of course, the most visible outcome is the expansion of the interest, clarity in terms of what he needs to do, and proof of what he has done so far. But other than that, advantages come in terms of that child becoming an adult and getting ready for the complex journey that would come during the high school, during the university, and eventually in his life in the career that he would pursue. So, a mentoring program which gives unfair advantage to your child by making sure that he builds skills which are focused on his executive function, which subsume, in a manner of speaking, the skills that are involved around 21st century dimensions, the skills like complex problem solving, the skills like creative thinking, skills like collaboration, they are all subsumed within this broad bucket, because then your child is able to take charge. This program is probably not for you. Why? Well, most of you would probably be looking for a certificate. Most of you would be looking for acceleration in marks. You would probably need a tutor in that case. Some of you would probably be looking for shortcuts or success mantras. I do not have any to give you, to be honest. But what I can assure you is a program which is based on rigorous practice. I can definitely give you a program which is based on my experience of having worked with these youngsters through UniVadmit Help for more than 10 years. We have done that with close to 1,000 students who have gotten into some of the best schools in the world, including my alma mater MIT, Stanford, Harvard, and other top colleges across the world. Across all of these students, what is common and what is most notable is a process of structured practice which leads to solving difficult problems and demonstrated outcomes. Now, as mentors, we would commit to working with your children and delivering you those, which are not short-term outcomes, but rather long-term process-based outputs. As my commitment to you, I promise you that I keep this program very selective and very small. This ensures that I am able to put a rigorous process to work. This ensures that I am able to customize it to the need of each and every child that works with us, and that one mentor is dedicatedly focused on the benefit and growth of one student. When that happens, I think you would be able to see measurable outcomes in terms of how your child is growing and enhancing his potentials. In fact, I'm so confident about this entire process that I'm making a very public commitment today to each one of you that if in 90 days you do not see any visible progress and outcomes, I would refund your money. In terms of visible outcomes, what we are looking at, we are definitely looking at 2 to 3 mini projects which would get completed over the course of this program, which is 12 months. I also think that a significant number of kids would be able to commit to a capstone, which is a longer term project once their interest map gets clarified and they have much more stronger direction in terms of what is it that they would want to do. Certainly, each one of the child would be able to go deeper in specific extracurricular activities that they want to take home to their universities or their high school for that matter in terms of depth, in terms of activities where they want to show longer term commitment. Plus, there would be visible projects, prototypes, surveys which demonstrate not their interest but more importantly proof points of how your children are growing. And that, my friends, is something that will ensure not just short term outcomes but long term success and readiness for future jobs. And if this makes sense to you, I would invite you for a conversation. You would find a link at the end of this video